First off, my apologies. This is the closest I have to red for Valentine's Day. I even had trouble finding this one. So this is as close as you're going to get to me for Valentine's Day. It's a funny holiday, actually. For some, it brings great excitement and great joy, and for others, it brings great dread. I don't know of any other holiday that does that. Which reminds me of a story. Some of you going, oh no, not another one. It was little Johnny's very first wedding that he was able to attend. And he's sitting with his mother all excited, watching everything. The bride comes in, and of course she's beautiful in the white flowing gown. And he says, Mom, why is she all dressed up in white? And his mother says, well, that's because this is one of the happiest days of her life. She's going to get married to a nice young man. And he went, huh. And he pauses for a moment, and then he says, Mom, why is the guy all dressed in black? Take it how you want. I don't know how many of you have ever read through the Bible or the Old Testament or the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis through Deuteronomy. But when you get around to Leviticus, it becomes a real drag. Sorry, God. Rules, regulations, all of this stuff that if you had lived during that time, you would have to follow to a T if you wanted to prove you were God's person, that you belonged to God's people. God had a whole... Okay, in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, there are about 613 regulations that God called laws. And they had to follow them. And there were some strict penalties if you didn't follow them. Why did God do that? At one point, God chose the descendants of Abraham to be his people. Out of all the nations in the world, he chose this nomad who had no son, daughter, no one to carry on the line. And he said, I'll make a great nation out of you. And he did. Kept his promise. And by the time we get to Exodus, they are a nation of 2 to 3 million people. Still not one of the largest, but pretty impressive. And God gives them all of these rules. And in Leviticus, he says one phrase as to why. You be holy, because I am holy. It was to set the people of Israel apart from all the other nations. They were God's people. The Lord still has his requirements, though it's not a list of do's and don'ts like the Israelites had. Okay, this isn't in my notes. This is only on the side, okay? One of the laws was you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Okay, now, is there anyone here that makes any sense to whatsoever? It's not even a dietary thing, like, don't eat a pig, so that was to protect the people from the sickness you could get from bad pork. It made no sense at all, yet in the middle of Leviticus, while he's talking about all these other important things, this one little law is thrown in, and no clue. And I didn't find out until recently why it was there. You want to know? At least you won't have to wait 66 years before you find out. Evidently, one of the surrounding nations of the Canaanite people, who Israel was to go in and defeat and take over their land, part of their worship to a demon, false god, was to cook a baby goat in its mother's milk as part of their worship. That was the only reason God gave that one. If the Canaanites hadn't had that, it would have been fine, Kill a kid, milk its mother, cook it. No biggie. But because it would have reminded people of a cultic religious ceremony, God made it one of the laws. Just don't do it. And that's how the people had to live. Why? Be holy, for I am holy. You're to be a set-apart people. Fast forward to now, it's the same thing. You call yourself Christian, you are a set-apart people. So, Peter's been interesting. He starts out with doctrine, and he's now moving into practicality. This is who you are. This is what you should do because of who you are. And in verse 13 through 16, Peter is giving some advice, and he concludes it with the very verses found in the book of Leviticus. Listen as I read. Therefore, gird your minds for action. Keep sober in spirit. Fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance. But, like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior. Because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. So, if we go back to the beginning of verse 13, it tells us to, in the version that I'm reading, gird your minds for actions. Another version will tell you to prepare your mind for action. The picture of girding is much easier to understand. It's like, well, what do you mean, prepare? This is a picture of, you've all seen Bible costumes, right? So they have this inner tunic that goes from their shoulder to their ankle. And that's their main dress. Then usually they have a vest-type covering that's a little thicker, almost can be used as a blanket. Now the idea is, you don't have the vest part on, but you still have this thing that goes down to your ankles, and it inhibits, is that the right word? Free movement. Inhibits? Whatever that word is, it's what it does, okay? So that there's no free movement. What a Jewish man or woman had to do is they had to lift it to above their knees and tie it off. This now gave them the freedom of movement for either, side to side, front and back, and quick movement, where long flowing tunic would hinder them. In other words, they went from a maxi to a mini. And that's what this means. It's the picture of getting the freedom of movement, metaphorically, Pull in the loose ends of your thinking. Reject the world's distractions and focus on the things of God. Prepare your mind. Gird your mind. Pull in those loose ends, those distractions that keep you from focusing on God. That's the first thing that Peter tells his readers. Then he tells them to be sober. Sober is the opposite of drunk. You can't be both at the same time. And so Peter is saying, be sober. Now the idea here is to be self-controlled, as opposed to being controlled by something else. Be self-controlled. And this is found in all areas of our life. Physically, it's our moral choices. Self-controlled in your moral choices. Emotionally, it's how we respond to our circumstances. Self-controlled. We can't control the things that happen to us, but we can control how we respond to them. Sober. Self-controlled. Mentally, it's our clarity of mind, or what we most often think about. You can tell a lot from a person in a very short time of conversation, because usually it's what they talk the most about is what they think the most about. Okay, I know. Super Bowl Sunday. To be honest, please don't think less of me. I could care less. I do not follow sports of any kind. And I know some of you are very avid fans, and that's great. I'm happy for you. The only time I watched the Super Bowl was when a church was having a Super Bowl party. And guess what I went for? Oh boy, you know me so well. I mean, I'd look up at the game and sit and be interested and watch, but I wanted the soft pretzels and meatball sandwiches and the stuff that was over there on the side. And there was another guy, we would sit and talk a lot of the times. But anyhow, where was I going with this? Oh, what you think about. You know, there are some people, no matter what time of the year, sports is all they talk about. So, what is their mind mostly set on? Sports. I was, back in my Hawaii days, I was the youth director of an all-Korean youth group. I was the only non-Korean in the group. They, for whatever reason, liked me. I had spoken at their camp one summer, and when their youth leader left, the leadership of the church asked if I would take the youth group because the kids really liked whatever I had said at camp. And I said yes, and I'm with them. I never had to worry about interpersonal relationships and stuff. Because you know what the majority of their thinking was? Money. And how to get it. Because that's what the majority of their parents were thinking of. You would talk to them, which I didn't too often because most of them didn't speak English. My youth did. They were bilingual. Most of their parents were not. Most of it was how their businesses were going and things like that. You can tell where a person's focus is by what they talk about the most. Now, we all have different thoughts and ideas and stuff like that, and that's fine. You don't want to go around 24/7 just talking about God. To be honest, that would make you a very boring person. But who is what do we think most about? What do we talk most about? So that's mentally. Spiritually, it's focusing on God and what He has to offer. if you are not sober or sober-minded, you are drunk, and you are controlled by some other influence. This reminds me of a movie that I had watched, a scene from a movie, and by now you all know me well enough. I enjoy movies, theater, all of that kind of stuff. And in this movie, this man was about to have a date with a woman, and she comes over to the house because he said he was going to make his famous chili for dinner, irrelevant, and she comes in with a bottle of wine. And he thanks her and goes into the kitchen, and you hear the pop, and he comes out with only one wine glass, and he hands it to her, and in his hand, he's holding a can of root beer. And she says, you don't drink? And he says, no, I just don't drink. And she said, was that because you don't like yourself when you drank? And he went, no, I loved myself when I drank. It was the other people that were having trouble. That's the idea. Controlled by something else. So, as sober-minded, we know and act on the correct priorities, and, if I may use the word, are not intoxicated with the allurements of the world. The things of the world do not control us. Are we still in the world? Yes. Do we still do things as part of the world? Yes. But the allurement doesn't cause us to lose our focus, our control into what's really, really important. Then Peter goes on to talk about when Christ is revealed. Peter really had an emphasis on the hope that was coming because of Christ's second return. Peter had lived through the first coming of Christ, had watched him die, had denied him, been forgiven. Peter had lived through all of that. But he has people that he's writing to that they've only heard about it. Kind of the same as you and me. We've only read about it. We didn't live it. We didn't watch what Christ went through for our salvation. We weren't one of the 500 who saw him alive again. And most of Peter's readers, they didn't know. So he uses the word when Christ is revealed. But he is referring to Jesus' promise of the second coming. Jesus will come in his full power. He will be seen for who he really is. Again, those of you who have ever read the book of Revelation, you read these descriptions of Jesus that are just mind-boggling. Yeah. Body of bronze, hair white as wool, flashing like lightning. That's my Jesus? Well, evidently it is. And I don't know about you, but I have no concept of what that's going to be like. Does Jesus turn it on and turn it off? Do we get to see him as he was when he was on this earth? Or are we going to be blasted with this description that's in Revelation? The closest that anyone ever came to it, to comprehend Jesus' full glory and who he really is, was Peter, James, and John. Only 3 of his 12 disciples, and that was on the Mount of Transfiguration. Because again, if you read that in the Gospels, it describes that Jesus started to glow and that his clothes were whiter than any laundry soap. That's, I forget what they actually call it, refiner's soap or something. But the idea is you couldn't wash them this white, this glowing. And Peter, as Peter does, opens mouth, inserts foot, and chews vigorously. Lord, it's so good for us to be here. He had no idea what he was talking about. Let's make houses for you. Let's just stay up here and I'll look at you glowing. Peter, cool it. They had no comprehension of who Jesus really was. Because for the 3 years on this earth, Jesus' glory was veiled in a human body, like yours and mine. Looked no different than any of us. And only that one time did he let, and I believe it was probably only part of his glory come through. And it still floored him. But at Jesus' second coming, he's not coming as a babe and growing up. He's coming on a white horse for battle in all of his glory. And that's what Peter's promising. Jesus is coming, and he will be seen for who he really is, and his full purpose will be accomplished when he comes again. God's redemptive plan is completed. That's where we get his grace that is given to you in this passage. In other words, it all comes together. And if I may add my words, hang in there. Hang in there. Because that's basically what Peter is telling his readers. Hang in there. And while you're hanging, gird your mind, prepare it for action. Be sober, self-controlled, not intoxicated or manipulated from the allurement of all the things that the world's going to throw at you. In verse 14, Peter goes on to say, sorry, I need to read it because I don't have it here. As obedient children, okay, do not be conformed. That's what I was looking for. That word conformed, my guess is if I was to ask, the majority of you, as soon as you heard the word conformed, your mind went to Romans 12:2, where it says, stop being conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you can prove what the will of God is, that which is perfect and complete. It is the same word. You would have been right if your mind jumped over there. You're right even if your mind didn't happen to jump over there. But you just thought conform. That sounds familiar. It's the exact same word. And that word actually means to be fashioned or squeezed into a similar, some words we just have trouble with, similar fashion, to be just like it. We get more of the idea of squeezed in the Romans passage. Here we get more of the idea fashioned in a similar light. I said it right because I wasn't thinking about it. Similar likeness. And then Peter goes on to say, don't act like you used to in your ignorance. So if I can sum that up, before becoming a Christian, most people are controlled or manipulated or intoxicated by their own lusts. I want this. This is how I'm going to live. Because you all know lust doesn't just mean sexual. Lust can be in any area of the life where it's a dominating desire. And so before becoming a Christian, that's how most people are controlled. That's how they live. Why? Because they don't know any better. Your ignorance. They don't know any better. The sin nature that we're all born with is the only nature. And so it makes sense for people to act this way because they're born bad. It's funny sometimes the situation God's put you in. I won't go into any details, but this guy was talking, and I was just floored by some of the things he was saying. It's like, am I that totally naive? Yeah, it's like, he's non-Christian. And it's going, how can you? And then I thought, oh yeah, you don't know Christ. You don't know Christ. And again, without giving details, I mentioned it to Rosie, and she said, well, that doesn't sound right. And I said, dear, he doesn't know Christ. There is no restraint. There is no Holy Spirit to work inside to battle the sin nature. The sin nature has full reign. And non-Christians are ignorant of it. They don't even realize it. It's just, that's the way I am. And so Peter is saying, you now know better. Don't you be going in this direction as you did BC, before Christ. After salvation is when the real battle begins. Because when you accept Jesus as your Savior, the Holy Spirit comes to dwell inside you. We call it the new man, new nature. Oh, you can call it what you want. But you now have two natures inside of you. God does not eradicate the old nature. I wish he did, but he doesn't. We still have the nature we were born with through the sin of Adam. But now we have the new one. That's why if you happen to do something wrong, you feel bad about it. You didn't used to feel bad about it, but you do now. Battle. God's nature, my nature, sin. And so, when that happens, it's a good indication you do belong to God. Because if you didn't, there'd be no battle. Peter also uses the word children, which I found interesting, because the idea of children is that children are constantly learning. They start out knowing basically nothing, and they're constantly learning, and they need help to mature. And that's just in the physical sense. We're not even talking spiritually. They need help. Peter is basically looking at his readers as the children. You're learning, and you need help, and I'm trying to give it to you. In verse 15, Peter is basically telling us, but like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior. Now, for you and me, for us, holiness is to be totally devoted or dedicated to God. We are set aside for his special use. And sometimes we don't even know what that use is going to be. We're set aside for his use and set apart from sin and its influence. So holiness for us is focusing on God because He's already done this for us, yet we're still living in this world. You see, holy for you and I does not really mean to be perfect or sinless. Again, I wish it was. I wish that when I accepted Christ as my Savior, sin no longer had a pull on me and that I lived perfectly for the rest of my life. I have been a Christian since I was age 8. So what's that? 58 years. And I can't begin to tell you how many battles I've had and how many I've failed. It would be nice if holy did mean perfect, did mean sinless, but it doesn't. What it does mean is that God gives us His Holy Spirit to help us obey Him and to give us the power to overcome and forsake sin. To overcome, to ignore the pull that it might have on you. We all have different weaknesses. Something that is tempting to me is not to you, and vice versa. But we all have something that we struggle with. And if you don't, remember to thank God for that, because you're in a very, very small percentage. Most of us have something that we're constantly battling. And with the help of the Holy Spirit, we can overcome. We don't let it pull us. Or we can forsake it, which the word forsaking means to turn your back on it. I can ignore it with the help of the Holy Spirit. And so it can't defile us. Now, holiness, as in the case of for God, means absolute purity, absolute majesty, absolute glory. Only God is completely holy, and He sets the standards. He hasn't given us a list of 613 laws that we have to follow to show that we belong to Him. Interesting, I was just talking with a young woman, and she's a Christian, but she's going through this phase of where she's trying to follow the Old Testament laws. So I didn't offer her a goat. You know, the whole don't mix your fabrics and don't do this with that. She's trying to do that, and it's like, I'm happy for you, just don't make me do it. We don't have that now. But you and I are made holy as we humbly follow God's directives, exhortations, and commands that we find in the New Testament. A lot of it is principles. But the key is, as we follow Him, He places His qualities, His attributes into us. Let me give you some quick examples. We follow God's commands, His directives, His exhortations to try to live the way He wants us to. And we find that we now have more mercy in our lives, giving favor to those who don't deserve it. Or maybe more compassion, loving and helping the unfortunate. Maybe more grace, doing what we can to bless others. Or maybe making us more just, being fair and impartial. As we follow the leading of the Holy Spirit, He makes us more like Him. We're told to be conformed to Christ. Why? Because we're a set-apart people. Verse 16 goes back to the reference of Leviticus 11, 44 and 45. And that brings me back to my introduction. The Jews were known for belonging to Jehovah God, the God who virtually wiped out the Egyptian nation. They never rose to the same power that they had before the plagues. The God who went before this group of people and defeated vast armies and helped a much smaller nation have victory. They were known for who they belonged to. They were set apart. They were God's people. Christian, as God's people, you're associated with God. It is your behavior that reflects who you belong to. And the other nations, the outsiders, there's only one way they know. And that's how you and I respond to God. Who we reflect. My question is, who are you reflecting? This week, maybe you want to take a little time and go through a few things. Talk to God about it. And say, all right, Lord, you know where I'm struggling. I need your help. The good thing about it, He will. As always, I'm available to talk. I'm around. Whether it's for your eternal soul you're not sure about, or just Christian growth. No, I don't have all the answers. I do about your eternal soul. No doubts about that one. But as far as Christian growth, we can search the scriptures together. Father God, thank you again for your word and this particular passage and what we can learn from it. Lord, as always, I am very grateful that you don't ask us to do anything, you don't give us the help and the power to do. Help us to avail ourselves of it. For these who have come today, I ask your special blessing upon them. May you strengthen, encourage, protect. Lord, for those who are not here today, for whatever reason, I ask that you might also bless them and give them the help they need to come back. Father, as we go out to the world, I ask that you might make us sensitive to your opportunities to reflect you and your Son, Jesus Christ. For all of these things, we say thank you, and we do give you the glory, honor,